Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here today. I'm Mercy Procaccini, a program officer with the OCLC Research Library Partnership and the host for today's webinar. We would like to open this event with a land acknowledgement. This presents a challenge since we are all in different places and the technology we use similarly flows across and over a multitude of landscapes. So consider the place in the land where you are living and breathing in this moment. We express gratitude to those who were here before us, and we seek to learn more in paying our respects to and honoring them. Personally, I would like to acknowledge that I occupy land that is part of the traditional territory of the Duwamish people, past and present. We invite you to join with us in reflection, knowledge seeking, and appreciation. So with those, so before we get started with the presentation, I have just a couple meeting logistics to cover. So our presentation today is Level Up, Lessons Learned from 6 years of Collaborative Technical Skills Development. For today, to eliminate background noise, you're in a listening only mode, and if you have any problems throughout the webinar, please submit a chat message to me, the host, or to my colleague, Marilee Profit, who's also here to support you today, and we'll do our best to help. Our panelists will present and we'll have a Q&A at the end, but we encourage you to submit your questions and your comments as we go along. So to get us warmed up, I'm going to ask everyone to find their chat window, and you can find the chat button at the lower right of your screen. Click on that to open up chat. And in chat, please introduce yourselves, your institution, where you're joining us from. We'd love to know who's in the room with us today. So after entering your text into chat, please be sure that that send to option is set to everyone. So not all attendees, which is an annoying WebEx feature, but please set that to everyone. And so that way the panelists and all attendees will be able to see your comments. One final note, we are recording this webinar and we'll make the recording and slides available online afterwards. So you'll have the opportunity to watch it again and share it with your colleagues. So with those housekeeping details attended to, I would like to acknowledge the OCLC Research Library Partnership, which both underwrites and inspires our work. Attendees of this webinar are from the OCLC RLP. Thank you for your continued support and input into our work, as these are crucial to our success. And now I'm delighted to turn things over to my colleague, Chayla Weber, who will kick things off for us.
Morning. Good morning from Seattle, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Really excited to share this program with you all this morning. So as many of you who regularly attend our webinars have heard me say before, OCLC has a long history of work in the area of archive, special, and distinctive collections in research libraries. We work in special collections because they're an important site of knowledge creation, and that's made possible by the library's commitment to stewardship of their distinctive collections. And we know that the unique nature of material in special collections can make scaling a challenge, and so we work to identify areas of common need and patterns of innovation that can help partners in libraries scale their learning and their expertise with these collections. Part of the history of our work in special collections is the Research and Learning Agenda for Archive, Special, and Distinctive Collections that came out in 2019. And it articulates the shared challenges and opportunities that research libraries are facing in this sphere and suggests some approaches for working on them together. And it continues to guide our work in this area now and will into the future. So one of the major issues surfaced in the agenda is our evolving use of and needs related to data and systems. in our increasingly digital and an increasingly digital environment is shaping our practice, and digital tools are present really in most areas of our work, not just in our electronic records programs, but in the array of systems we now use to manage collections and track workflows and provide discovery and access to the collections in our care. The agenda highlighted this evolution really in multiple areas, including calling out the skill gaps that are evident as we try to build born digital archival programs, and the broad need across roles and functions for data literacy as we are calling on our data to work harder and move through multiple systems and serve multiple needs. And while this was situated in archives and special collections, I really do think that this is a need across the library. So this is certainly going to be a program relevant across the library. So the program at the Bentley Library has been a leader in really smart and holistic approaches to emerging system needs, and so I'm really excited that Max and Liz and Mike agreed to join us today and present on their work. And with that, I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to discuss lessons learned from 6 years of collaborative technical skills development at the Bentley Historical Library. As the Archives of the University of Michigan, the Bentley Historical Library acknowledges that the historical origins and present locations of the university were made possible by cession of lands by Anishinaabe and Wyandot peoples under coercive treaties common in the colonization and expansion of the United States. These lands continue to be the homeland of Indigenous people, and we seek to reaffirm and respect their contemporary and ancestral ties to the land and to recognize their contributions to the university. 3 of us will be speaking with you. We have filled diverse roles at the Bentley, ranging from student employee to assistant director over more than a decade. Max Eckerd started working at the Bentley in 2015 and is now the assistant director for curation. Mike Shellcross worked at the Bentley from 2010 to 2018. He is now an associate archivist at the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research at the University of Michigan. My name is Elizabeth Gadelia, and I started working at the Bentley in 2015, and I am now the Archivist for Digitization Services. We define technical upskilling as the process of acquiring and expanding technical skills. As academic and cultural heritage institutions offer more digital collections and more digital services, technical upskilling has moved from an individual to an institutional responsibility. In our experience, staff increasingly need general technical literacy to work efficiently with digital information, and often benefit from knowledge of more advanced subjects, such as web development or programming. For institutions that lack IT support or want to avoid a situation where one individual is responsible for all technical issues, a key question is, how do we encourage and support staff to develop technical skills and promote technical literacy, especially as a group where the benefits can be amplified? To help answer this question, we are going to reflect on 4 technical upskilling initiatives that took place from 2014 to 2019 at the Bentley. We will briefly cover the institutional context of the Bentley and provide an overview of the 4 initiatives. Then we will explore outcomes, lessons learned, and considerations for others exploring technical upskilling projects. While our experiences may reflect unique circumstances and perspectives, we hope that the audience will come away with relevant takeaways for their own institutions.
So, a bit about institutional context. Formally established by the Regents of the University of Michigan in 1935, the Bentley serves as both the official archives of the University of Michigan and a repository for organizational records and personal papers for entities from across the state. We'll be referring a lot in this presentation to variations of the curation team, And that's taken on many forms over the years, and all of us have been or are part of that team. The curation team at the Bentley supports the library's mission by appraising, arranging, and describing archival collections, regardless of format, whether they're physical, analog, or born digital, digitizing them, conserving them, providing access to them, and providing archival storage and ongoing collections management for them. As it pertains to technical skills, some of this also includes the management of archival systems and data, and providing strategic vision for the development, maintenance, and integration of our technical ecosystem.
Good morning, everyone. This is Mike Shawcross. It's a pleasure to be with you today. We would now like to briefly introduce the 4 collaborative technical upskilling initiatives undertaken by the Bentley Historical Library. First, the 2014 to 2016 ArchivesSpace-Archivematica-DSpace Workflow Integration Project was a grant-funded initiative where participants were immersed in a variety of technical upskilling opportunities while they developed an end-to-end digital archives workflow. Next, the 2015 Curation Team Workshops were an informal attempt to raise the general technical literacy of the broader curation team. After that, the Curation Team Technical Skills Pilot Project ran from 2017 to 2018 and represented a more formal and inclusive approach to peer-to-peer learning experiences. And finally, the 2019 Bentley Audiovisual Quality Control Utility, or Baroque project, incorporated group upskilling into a practical software development initiative. While each initiative varied in terms of the total staff involvement, planning, and intended outcomes, all were collaborative group undertakings that provided opportunities to enhance the technical skills of staff and at the same time expanded the Bentley's capacity to address core duties and responsibilities. We'll now take a closer look at each of these initiatives. The 2014-2016 Workflow Integration Project was funded by a grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and involved 3 curation team members who worked alongside consultants from Artifactual Systems and IT staff from the University of Michigan Libraries. The primary goal of this project was to integrate functionality of the ArchivesSpace, Archivematica, and DSpace open source platforms to produce an end-to-end digital archives workflow that would take content from the point of deposit up to the point of dissemination. In doing so, the project also sought to introduce efficiencies in the creation and reuse of metadata across archival management, preservation, and access systems. At the outset of the initiative, the team knew they would be introduced to a number of new technologies, but they failed to anticipate the full range of learning opportunities that would be offered by the work. Indeed, one of the most interesting realizations was that technical upskilling did not have to involve hard skills such as programming or database management. Some of the most important lessons the team encountered were around project management and communication. Early in their work with IT consultants from Artifactual Systems, the curation team members were introduced to the Agile software development methodology, which seeks to break down complex tasks into more manageable components that are addressed in an iterative and incremental manner. It was also highly important for all the curation team members to learn how to effectively communicate with IT staff, which involved clearly articulating needs and requirements, properly using terminology, and providing rich contextual details. While the above lessons exposed the curation team to new collaboration strategies, the Workflow Integration Project also provided an opportunity to gain experience with the Python programming language. The team members began by learning the basics, such as simple terminology, how to use functions, and simple string and file manipulation by jointly following an online tutorial in bi-weekly half-hour sessions. With this foundational knowledge, the team then collaborated with an experienced grad student developer to learn how to use Python to parse, extract, and clean metadata elements in encoded archival description XML finding aids, things like names, dates, subjects, extents, and physical facet terms. After gaining proficiencies with these skills, the team then turned their attention to learning about application programming interfaces, or APIs, and eventually produced Python scripts that enabled the automation of additional workflow steps. Thus, while the team expected much of the technical work on the project to be handled by consultants, they ended up acquiring a vast store of new knowledge and skills by working together to master some difficult topics. Inspired by the learning opportunities that emerged in the Workflow Integration Project, the curation team team kicked off a series of informal workshops in 2015. Whereas the first initiative only involved the 3 members of the grant team, the second undertaking was more intentionally inclusive, as the entire curation team was welcome to participate. At a high level, the goal of these workshops was to share information and raise awareness about different tools and technologies that were in use across the curation team. The basic structure was for an experienced team member to provide an introduction and some context around relevant uses of the tool, and then for attendees to form small groups to participate in some hands-on exercises. Workshop topics included things such as performing simple operations with the Windows command line interface, using the Audacity audio editor to analyze and edit sound recordings, and cleaning messy data with OpenRefine. These workshops were highly successful in terms of raising awareness about the work being performed by colleagues, but as there was no real assessment of learning outcomes or documentation of how skills may have been used for work responsibilities, their overall efficacy in building technical skills was less clear.
The 2017 to 2018 Technical Skills Pilot gave participants the opportunity to meet during regularly scheduled weekly sessions that were led by a planning committee of 3 project archivists. This initiative was built upon previous curation team workshops, but covered a broader range of topics, with more emphasis on peer-to-peer learning experiences. It assessed outcomes through surveys and a report in order to help identify directions for future initiatives. It also acted as a starting point for a more formalized approach to developing technical literacy among curation team members and introducing skills and tools that could be used by participants in their work. Based on curation team input, 14 sessions of the Technical Skills Pilot were dedicated to learning Python. The Python sessions covered fundamentals of the programming language and relied on 2 free online resources. Ahead of each Python session, participants would work on short problem sets, supported with recommended readings and videos that were selected by the planning committee. Participants could then continue to work on problems, share answers, and ask questions during sessions. The 8 rotating topic sessions, on the other hand, covered specific programs and platforms like Excel, GitHub, OpenRefine, and Trello, as well as topics such as regular expressions and email archiving. Unlike the Python sessions, the format of the rotating topic sessions varied. Some sessions featured presentations, demonstrations, and workshops, while others were organized to foster discussions, solve problems, and follow online tutorials as a group.
The 2019 Bentley Audiovisual Quality Control, or Baroque project, arose from a demonstrated need. The archivist for AV curation recognized that QC workflows for digitized sound recordings were inefficient and time-consuming, and in the process of producing code to automate aspects of these procedures, archivists, technicians, and student workers were introduced to new approaches to project planning and management, as well as new development tools like Git and GitHub. So, for example, the preliminary scope and desired outcomes for the project were established using a basic impact effort matrix, a decision-making tool used to prioritize projects and manage time more efficiently. Participants also learned about project chartering, specifically using this template from the Management Center, which resulted in the development of criteria to measure the project's success, a communication strategy, a timeline for important project milestones, and designation of roles and responsibilities. And finally, they also learned about Agile software development methodology as outlined in Jonathan Rasmussen's The Agile Samurai. This methodology emphasizes iterative and incremental development for time-bound software development projects so that large tasks are broken down into smaller components that are addressed in short 1 to 2 week time frames, often referred to as sprints. A key feature of Agile project management is regular, face-to-face communication among team members to identify challenges and share ideas, as well as meetings with a product owner, in our case, the archivist for AV curation, who provides feedback and suggestions in real time as the work progresses. Once the project began in earnest, key learning opportunities also included introducing the entire project team to Git and GitHub during a preliminary sprint so that they can make contributions to our GitHub repository, demonstrating the importance of iterative and incremental development and the agile execution of project plans in response to changing needs and new feedback. For example, rather than duplicate the functionality of existing tools for file format validation, which was one of Baroque's functional requirements, the team decided to implement the tool, MediaConk, and even though it wasn't what they'd originally planned, revised an upcoming work cycle devoted to file format validation so that it instead focused on bug fixes and general improvements. While the project was ultimately focused on developing a Python utility, team members discovered that everyone, regardless of technical ability, had a part to play. While the most advanced Python developer on the team would serve as technical lead, other participants were able to contribute in a variety of ways, which included some basic Python coding, but also user testing, feedback on product features, and the creation of documentation. And finally, dedicating time during the project to think about how the team would go on to maintain it. This was something that would later become very important once the tool was implemented into AV workflows.
We'd now like to discuss some of the specific outcomes that emerged from the Curation Team's upskilling initiatives. We want to underscore that the informal and ad hoc nature of our first two initiatives meant that we did not articulate desired outcomes or employ any assessment protocols. The second two initiatives were more intentional, however, in identifying and measuring outcomes. So, based upon our available assessments and informal observations, we believe that the Curation Team's upskilling initiatives led to the following outcomes: improved efficiency and throughput, increased team cohesion and collaboration, and enhanced professional development. The first and perhaps most measurable improvement was found in gains in efficiency and throughput for various operations. The best example of this is likely the metadata remediation undertaken by the Curation Team during the 2014 to 2016 Workflow Integration Project. While preparing to import metadata for more than 3,000 EAD finding aids to ArchivesSpace, the project team realized there were significant inconsistencies and variations in elements such as names, dates, subject terms, and so forth that would require immediate action. Using their newly acquired Python skills, the team members were able to parse the XML documents and extract information, which was then cleaned and normalized using OpenRefine, as illustrated in the screenshot to the right. A second Python script was then used to write the information back to the finding aids, which could then be imported into ArchivesSpace. This project would have been nearly impossible if it had been undertaken using manual procedures. Simply understanding the breadth of variations would have been challenging with manual procedures, but the Python scripts allowed the team to extract names, dates, subject terms, and so forth, so they could be compared and normalized in OpenRefine. Being able to do this work in large-scale batches was an even more important benefit, as a manual process to update all 3,000 finding aids would have taken months or even longer to complete. In assessing this outcome, key measures included the reduction of time and labor expended on frequent and repetitive tasks, the ability to automate simple tasks that did not require human intervention, and focusing human judgment and attention on activities that would yield the greatest impact and value, such as clarifying appropriate dates for a collection. The second significant outcome for the initiatives was increased team cohesion and collaboration. This was nicely illustrated by the Curation Team's pivot to remote work at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Through the various technical upskilling activities and other team building events, the Curation Team had a strong internal support network. In addition, the exploration of various technologies in the preceding years helped team members rapidly adopt video conferencing and other collaboration tools. Key indicators of this outcome included the shared experiences during upskilling initiatives, and especially shared failures and expressions of vulnerability, helped develop and strengthen bonds among team members. There was a broader recognition of how all team members can make meaningful contributions to projects, regardless of their level of technical skill or experience. And finally, there was a tendency of increased technical literacy to help demystify technical solutions and aid in the recognition of where they could be effectively deployed. The final outcome we'd like to discuss is enhanced professional development. While all participants in the upskilling initiatives realized there was a potential for increased knowledge and skills, we did not fully appreciate how the projects would enhance the career trajectories of team members. Evidence of this outcome is provided by team members' regular application of skills and technologies to daily responsibilities, things like using Trello boards, Excel formulas, and Python scripts in a variety of contexts. We've even seen 3 curation team members leave the academic library world for jobs in the IT and data analysis sectors. In considering this outcome, we noted that the upskilling initiatives focused on skills and topics that are not typically found among professional development offerings for libraries and archives. The initiatives significantly lowered barriers to professional development. Because they were on site, no travel was necessary. Because they occurred during normal business hours, no vacation or paid time off was required. And because they were staff-led, no costs were involved. Finally, the focus on practical application of skills and technologies meant that the initiatives laid a foundation for future growth that many of the curation team members have followed.
By reviewing the initiatives together with the benefits of hindsight, we were able to identify challenges, missed opportunities, and successful strategies. While each initiative was unique in scope and design, we found 3 lessons to be universally relevant. First, team members are significant assets for group skill development. Second, well-defined deliverables enhance personal outcomes. And third, regular and actionable assessments improve planning and implementation. I'll discuss each of these lessons in more detail. One of the clearest lessons we learned was that involving a team member with experience applying a technical skill created an efficient learning environment that was beneficial to the overall initiative. For example, during the 2017 to 2018 technical skills pilot, a staff member who had developed expertise with Excel volunteered to lead a high-impact session that ended up reaching a wide range of staff with various skill sets and job responsibilities. Similarly, the success of the 2019 Baroque project in creating a functioning deliverable over a limited time period was due in large part to establishing a lead technical role. This role set the overall technical direction, created a structure for the command line tool, and reviewed and commented on code contributions across all stages of the project. It is also important to note that team members do not need to have technical expertise to make significant contributions to a group's skill development. For example, having 1 or more team members undertake a project management role during initiatives helps to ensure accountability within the team, as well as the achievement of project goals. So an important first step in considering a technical skills development initiative then is to learn about the interests and strengths of team members. These individual interests and strengths are assets that can move an initiative forward and lead to positive group outcomes. Involving individuals in this way not only increases their engagement, but can give them an opportunity for professional development and to be recognized by their peers. In reviewing the initiatives, we were interested in identifying factors that participants enjoyed and found motivating. Social aspects of initiatives and professional development opportunities are important factors for participation and positive outcomes. But an even more important factor was having a well-defined and practical deliverable associated with the learning opportunity. Those involved in the 2014 to 2016 workflow integration project, for example, found that while working through a free online Python tutorial provided an important introduction to key programming concepts and conventions, the practical work of cleaning and preparing finding aids for migration into ArchivesSpace made those concepts and conventions more concrete. Similarly, the 4 participants in the 2019 Baroque project, who undertook most of the coding work, further developed their existing Python knowledge, while the entire project team gained an in-depth understanding of technical specifications associated with audiovisual quality control. The 2015 Curation Team Workshops, on the other hand, lacked clear deliverables and thus may not have been as impactful. So while raising awareness of workflows and tools is important, the absence of clear, relevant deliverables may limit the utility of the sessions or individuals' overall engagement. Despite best efforts, hindsight revealed that all 4 initiatives lacked robust forms of assessment for individual participants and the means to incorporate participant feedback. In the 2014 to 2016 Workflow Integration Project, the successful implementation of ArchivesSpace and Archivematica provided clear indications of the technical skills developed by the team, but individual assessment was overlooked. Similarly, the successful deployment of the tool developed during the 2019 Baroque project provided evidence of the initiative's success and, by extension, the growth of the participants' technical skills, but detailed individual measurements were not included. Of the 4 initiatives, individual assessment was more clearly emphasized during the 2017 to 2018 technical skills pilot through the distribution of assessment surveys. However, although the survey results were favorable, the response rates were not consistent enough to draw meaningful conclusions. The value of regular and actionable assessments lies in their ability to help tailor learning initiatives to the actual needs of individual team members and their daily work responsibilities, as well as help demonstrate the outcomes and impacts of these efforts in a clear manner. For group initiatives with a strong education component, applying multiple forms of individual assessment throughout the initiative can result in a more holistic understanding of the impact on individual participants and, by extension, the entire group. For example, while the technical skills pilot relied on assessment surveys, periodic face-to-face check-ins with individuals during the initiative could have provided the planning committee with more guidance on how to refine or re-envision upcoming sessions to better meet the needs of participants. Utilizing a variety of assessment methods can also accommodate differences in individual communication preferences. Acknowledging that some participants may be more forthcoming through writing and others through speaking can result in more robust assessment data. Employing individual assessment methods is also important for initiatives that produce products, where individual growth and achievements can seem secondary to deploying a functional tool. For example, while the end products of the Workflow Integration Project and Baroque project indicate clear group growth, what is less clear is the overall distribution of that skill development and the extent to which the gains impacted individual work performance. Given that workplace technical skills initiatives represent an allocation of personal time and organizational resources, institutions considering similar efforts may want to consider how they can best illustrate the return on investment through the assessment of participants.
And that leads nicely into things to consider when exploring technical upskilling projects. Over the course of the technical upskilling initiatives, the curation team faced a number of challenges, and those included making the case and achieving buy-in for new efforts, working within time and resource constraints, striving for inclusive experiences, and building a culture that values technical upskilling. And this portion of the presentation thus highlights some key considerations to consider when exploring technical upskilling projects. On first consideration, it may seem that improving the technical skills of a team only presents upsides for the organization as a whole, as well as for individual participants. However, there are a variety of reasons why managers as well as team members may hesitate to move forward, in which case it may be necessary to make a case for why a technical skills initiative should be undertaken. Questions around the time required for initiatives and the overall tangibility of benefits may be foremost in the concerns of administration. In seeking buy-in, then, initiatives and intended outcomes should be framed by an awareness of organizational culture, structure, and values. Throughout these initiatives, then, the curation team sought administrative support by connecting efforts with one of the library's core strategic goals, to create more product with less process, at least when it makes sense, by employing efficient workflows through technical innovation. To attract and sustain staff participation in technical upskilling initiatives, alignment with individuals' varied motivations for acquiring new skills and knowledge is important. Gaining some knowledge of potential participants' interests, professional goals, and current or prospective projects may thus yield important data for creating such alignment. At the same time, in the absence of clearly defined benefits, either personal or work-related, there may be little incentive to invest time and energy to delve into new material that may prove to be both confusing and frustrating. In those cases, connecting the acquisition of technical skills to an urgent work need or long-standing pain point may also demonstrate the value of an initiative to individuals. And finally, we found that helping staff take ownership of initiatives and defining expectations also proved to be important steps to not only gain buy-in, but also maintain the involvement of participants and ensure that everyone stayed on the same page. As with most undertakings in academic and cultural heritage institutions, all 4 of the curation team's technical skills development initiatives face time and resource constraints, as participation took place in addition to existing duties and responsibilities. Gaining administrative support allowed organizers to block off periods of the work week, but even then, it could be difficult to master, let alone grasp, complex topics in a relatively brief period of time. And, while time and resource constraints are 2 of the most important factors to consider when undertaking a new project or initiative, they're certainly not the only constraints. Others include things like scope. What is the scope of the project? What is the overall timeline of the project, or when is it going to happen? What are the available human or financial resources to support the project? And how important is the quality of the final product? We found that it can be helpful to think of these as trade-offs. This is a lesson we learned from the Agile Samurai. When budget or other resources are high or time is unlimited, the scope of the final product can be expansive and its quality can be high. If time is limited, however, scope and quality may need to be adjusted. In the majority of projects, at least one of these trade-offs will need to give, and it can be helpful for team members and other stakeholders to explicitly agree on which of these are flexible and which are not. Time and resource constraints thus don't inherently prevent or sideline a project, but you do have to think about them. And they may mean that the scope of the endeavor may not be as expansive as it might be if those time and resource constraints didn't exist. So I'd like to start here by stating that we're primarily talking here about inclusivity within the curation team of the Bentley Historical Library at the University of Michigan. So we're already starting from a privileged place and one with a lot of different legacies for better and worse. Over the 6-year period encompassed by these initiatives, the curation team faced a number of important and challenging questions around inclusivity. While the first initiative was centered around the 2014-2016 Workflow Integration Project Team, which brought with it internal perceptions of a club, quote-unquote club, that was exclusively for a select few who, frankly, also happened to be white men, organizers of later efforts deliberately sought to involve people who might otherwise have been excluded from these conversations, especially those without pre-existing technical skills or those who didn't see the relevance of such skills in their day-to-day work. These efforts at Inclusivity led the curation team to explore what's called multi-level or differentiated instruction as an approach to learning technical skills, which is a method of essentially tailoring instruction to meet individual needs, to better ensure that needs related to diverse abilities and interests could be met. Although, in hindsight, it's definitely clear that we could have been better about this throughout the initiatives. This inclusion brought with it further questions of equity, and just offering a further caution in creating effective and meaningful participation models to promote group learning and technical upskilling. We'd also suggest that mandatory inclusion is not inherently good or desirable for every employee in every situation, and nor should staff feel that the lack of participation in such initiatives will negatively impact performance reviews and that kind of thing. While in general, we take pride in the fact that these initiatives attempted to be intentionally inclusive, We also had to remember that our intentions didn't necessarily equal impact, and that there may have been a very good reason why some would prefer not to participate in initiatives like these. Participation may not be preferable, for example, during times of professional change, such as the beginning of a new leadership role, or during personal change, such as balancing work and childcare during a pandemic. Some considerations are also organizational. There's some inside baseball here, but for example, there are a number of different types of classification and status of employees at the Bentley and at the university besides quote unquote regular archivists. These include folks like project archivists, paraprofessionals, student workers, and others. And all of the presenters, while archivists now at one point in time have also been student workers or interns or project archivists working at the Bentley or similar institutions, positions that each come with their own unique burden to bear. What we've learned from these initiatives, however, is that while folks like these shouldn't necessarily be excluded from such initiatives, during the planning stages, their roles should be very carefully negotiated to take into account factors like personal interests and goals, as well as the structure within which the project team will be working. While, for example, the technical skills pilot was run by volunteers and participants could choose their level of engagement, other initiatives like Baroque were made up of contributors that all reported to the same person. And while this definitely helped facilitate getting work done, this arrangement at the same time isn't exactly voluntary. All of which is to say that in our case, we learned that particular attention should be paid to factors like job classification, employee status, especially when you're talking about students and interns and volunteers, reporting structure, performance expectations, and compensation, especially as they relate to power dynamics within the organization. For example, while participation on initiatives like these may be a good learning experience for student workers, it should be balanced with the fact that they're often hired to do very narrowly scoped work, that they have a lower rate of pay, and that there may be special regulations on the type and amount of work they can do, and that they're likely balancing their work with other competing priorities. And so this has definitely been a process, and just like everything we're describing, it's of course very much a work in progress. So this webinar series is fitting. We're trying to make a nuanced point here that's as much about equity as it is about inclusivity. It's just not fair, for example, to ask a digitization technician or a student worker to perform the work of an archivist and not get compensated accordingly, regardless of their ability or aptitude, because paternalistically it's good for them. And finally, Liz and Mike and I are archivists, and some of us are middle managers. While inspired by the project and product management practices of our peers, none of us are experts in organizational culture or change. However, looking out with hindsight, of course, and looking outside of the libraries and archives literature has provided some clues as to factors that contributed to both the success of the individual initiatives and, over time, how we attempted to build a culture that values technical upskilling. So Adam Grant at the Wharton School, for example, has written about the types of discomfort that help and hinder collaborative initiatives and teams. Rather than trying to avoid conflict, Grant actually characterizes this as an absence of conflict as apathy, not harmony. Conflict is instead one of the ways that a team of people can be creative and make good decisions, but not just any kind of conflict. On the one hand, task conflict is a disagreement about the content of the discussion. On the other hand, relationship conflict is a perception of interpersonal difference between the people in the group. Grant performed a study that involved groups working on collaborative tasks, the results of which suggest that failed groups tended to have much more relationship conflict, where they're busy disliking one another and not focusing on the work to be done. And in contrast, high-performing groups experience much more on-task conflict, especially early on in projects, and spent time working to better understand the ideas being presented. And most, if not all, of Bentley's initiatives encountered at least some degree of task conflict at the beginning of the initiative. All of them, however, lack significant interpersonal conflict. In terms of building a culture that values technical upskilling, it's important that those who led the above initiatives sought to cultivate the kind of workplace culture they desired to implement, in part by simply defining it. Whether to create more product with less process by employing efficient workflows through technical innovation, or to innovate and create new technologies, which, along with repairing, maintaining, and improving those technologies, is an explicit, written, and regularly reviewed value of the curation team, these values gain traction because they map well to the Bentley's overall mission and yet are special to the curation team. Camille Fournier reinforces this point. Understand what your company's values are, understand what your team's values are, write the values down if they aren't already written, and try to be explicit. And it's also significant that the impetus for technical upskilling was quote, movement spearheaded by individuals and middle managers rather than a top-down mandate from administration. While a leader, such as a director or a dean, is often in a position of authority, according to Brian Walker and Sarah A. Soule, they're not as effective as what they call a movement maker in leading such a cultural movement. Rather than with a top-down mandate, all of the initiatives described above instead started with a diffuse dissatisfaction with the status quo. And this brewing discontent turned into a movement when a voice arises that provides a positive vision and a path forward that's within the power of the crowd. And kind of translating that to the Bentley context, a path forward that's inspired by those on the curation team and that ultimately did not need to be outsourced. And that brings us to our conclusion. Perhaps the most important lesson that we learned from our experiences deal with the inherent limitations of basically everything we described above, a project-based approach to technical skills development. Organizational culture is much more effective than project-based or individual efforts to build this kind of culture. Although the curation team's initiatives were roughly consecutive over the span of 2014 through 2019, each was a project of a set duration and concluded at an established end date. And as a result, there was not necessarily comprehensive coverage or even continuity over those 6 years. And while we've tried in this presentation to make a case for a kind of through line between the initiatives, we also recognize a need to better establish a culture of innovation that fosters and over the long haul sustains group technical skill development. If you enjoyed this presentation, then you can also look out for our much more detailed discussion of these collaborative technical skills development initiatives in an upcoming American Archivist article, which is currently slated to be published in the fall-winter 2022 edition. And thank you for this. It's been a very wonderful opportunity, and we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much. So folks, please feel free to drop questions into the chat. Please make sure that your chat is sent to everyone so that we can all see them. So our first question is from Mei Chan. She says, this experience shared is amazing. I want this transformation for my workplace. One question is, what did it take to come up with the training material, curriculum?
I guess I could take a first pass at answering that, and thank you very much for your question. This is Mike. I think, really with the initial, like our grant project, that workflow integration project, the developers we were working with were using Python. We recognized that Python was something useful, so we just went out and found just a free online tutorial. I think in the next iteration of our training, and we just kind of worked along with that, so we, kind of had our sea legs underneath us. And then when it came time to having to work more with cleaning data in our EAD finding aids, that's where we kind of worked closely with a grad student who was very experienced with Python and who helped further, I guess, it was like an additional boot camp, if you will. I think with the next iteration, our informal curation team workshops, that was really something where people who had experience with different tools were just willing to share that with the rest of the team. So I had done some work with the Windows command line interface, for instance. So I just kind of put together some simple exercises, to kind of help orient people to using that. We had colleagues who were using Audacity, the audio editor, a lot. So they kind of just came in and showed what they were doing with it and also organized some exercises. So at least those early ones, it was on some regards just kind of whatever was handy, and also just where we had some experience on our team helped us identify, I guess, kind of the curriculum, if you will, for early training things. Maybe I'll leave Liz and Max to talk a little bit about the other initiatives.
Sure, I can jump in real quick and talk about the technical skills pilot. So similar to what Mike talked about during the Python sessions, we relied on 2 free online resources that members of the planning committee had already worked through. And then for the rotating sessions, we took a different approach and we based a lot of the topics that we chose on survey responses that were taken from the curation team prior to the start. And we ask them, for example, what do they want to learn? But then we also ask people, what do you think others should learn? And what would you be willing to teach? And that really sort of informed our curriculum for the technical skills pilot. Good question. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in, and there's a couple suggestions in the chat about the software carpentry and data carpentry program. And yes, that was definitely something that I personally participated in, and others on the curation team did, that sort of helped introduce us to the basics. In terms of Baroque and the kind of curriculum, you know, a lot of that, some of that built on this existing kind of skill set that we had on the team with some experience with Python. But in terms of like how to sort of create a command line tool, the technical lead was very inspired by some of the work of Tessa Walsh, like Brunhilde and Bulk Reviewer and those kinds of things. So the kind of framework that she has for the command line interface framework is definitely like, we used that exact framework for building the Baroque command line interface tool. So.
Great, thank you. So yeah, there are a couple of questions in the chat about the carpentries, and it sounds like we've already addressed those. So I'll move on. Eleni Castro asks, has the accepted manuscript, do you have the accepted manuscript version or preprint version of the article that you might be willing to share? Or is it coming out very soon?
Well, this is Mike. You know, we just submitted the manuscript to the editor of the American Archivist a couple weeks ago, so I'm not exactly sure what the procedures are on sharing a preprint version. Maybe we could find out and follow up, and if we're able to share, I think we'd be happy to share a link. Maybe we could send it to our friends at OCLC who could distribute it to attendees or something
Absolutely.
if we're able to. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question. I was interested in the way that you talked about trying to that you were talking about differentiated instruction and trying to think about teaching, like helping folks with different skill levels as well as learning styles learn some of these skills. Could you talk a little bit more about that, or maybe give some examples of how you did that?
I think in my mind, at least, there's some very kind of clear examples of that in the way that we approach the technical skills pilot. So maybe Liz, you'd be comfortable speaking to that. But in terms of Baroque, I think one thing we tried to do was ensure that there was lots of different roles that people could have as they participated. So some of those roles were like a kind of AV expert type role, and I think all of us know a whole lot more about AV QC workflows than we did at the beginning. We tried to have different like a project management type roles, and for some of the Python ones, where I guess the way you would describe it as differentiation is like we had different kinds of ways that people engage with the project, some of which was totally independently. Some of this was more in kind of a sort of pair programming environment. Some of it was more kind of a write some code, have it be reviewed, commented on, rewrite it kinds of environment. So just different ways that people, and some of it was we'd have like the technical lead or someone else create a structure sort of for the particular function that we were working on, and had people fill in code within that structure. So there was different, I guess there was different ways, at least in terms of the coding, that we tried to do that.
Yeah, and then for the technical skills pilot, I feel like that was something we struggled with. We found that, for example, with the Python sessions, participants who were sort of at both ends of the skills spectrum dropped off over time. So those who sort of stayed with that had already had at least some knowledge of Python coming into it, and were using it either as a refresher or to get a little bit more beyond the basic foundation of the programming language. Some of the things that were maybe slightly more successful was during the rotating topic sessions, for example. We had people who had more experience with a tool or a platform. They gave sort of presentations to the group in a more informal kind of collegial atmosphere. So that was a way of bringing in people who already had experience and giving them the opportunity to discuss that with their colleagues and for questions to be answered in ways that weren't really happening otherwise at that time with that particular group of people. So I think that's definitely a challenge, and something that as we move forward with additional sorts of initiatives, we will continue to consider.
Great, thank you so much. We're almost at the top of the hour, so I'll just say thank you for this really thoughtful presentation and for answering our questions. Thanks to everybody for joining us, and I'll turn it back over to Mercy to wrap us up.
Great. Thank you, Chayla. Yes, just to reiterate that, Max, Liz, Mike, thank you. We've learned so much, and there's so much that's useful here. To all our attendees, thanks for your engagement. I wanted to let you know that we will be sharing the recording of this webinar out, and all registrants will receive a notification by email when that recording is available. Thanks for joining today, and we just hope you have a great rest of your day, and take care, and thanks again to our presenters for all the useful sharing and insights that you shared with us today. Take care all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.